भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Up to now, what we have done is, we have seen 7 verses of Mandukya Upanishad, the text of Mandukya Upanishad. Okay? Now, while these verses are going on, there were some verses of Gaudapada karika, but they were just reiterating what the verses were saying, so I did not choose them. Now we are just seeing only 2 verses of Gaudapada karika in this Agama Prakarana. Okay? And this is, there are total 12 verses in Mandukya Upanishad, out of which we have already done 7, so 5 are still to go. So after doing these 2 verses, we will pick up again on Upanishad and we will go to the 8th verse of the Upanishad. Right? Then, once
Gaudapada is the teacher of Shankara, or
yes.
is the teacher of Shankara?
No, teacher's teacher.
Okay.
And then what we will do, once the 12 verses of the Upanishads are over, Gaudapada's karika continues on and he has 3 other chapters. Okay? Then we will continue, I have selected a few verses from those karika so that you can see the glimpse of when he is putting his own word, what is being said by the Upanishad. In doing so, you dwell on what is said by the Upanishad from different perspectives. Okay? And then when you are able to understand the perspectives clearly, then you know that okay, I am understanding. Otherwise what happens is, you heard it one way and you think you figured it out, then when you hear it some other way and you are thrown off. And that means that the process of understanding a given thing in its totality is not over yet. Because you think that you understand, but you actually see only one aspect. You miss out on the other aspect. So therefore, it may seem as though there is a lot of repetition, but actually this repetition without which you will never understand all these concepts in their totality. So they are not just redundant repetitions, they are done very deliberately to make you see the same subject matter from many, many different sides, to make sure that you understand the totality of that idea and not just understand it partially and conclude that I have understood. Done very deliberately. Okay? So this is where now we will come to Gaudapada karika. Only the 2 verses in Agama Prakarana. Now you yourself will be able to understand, because he is just reiterating what we have seen so far in his own words. Okay? So here he says, Prapancho yadi vidyeta nivarteta na samshayaha maya matram idam dvaitam advaitam paramarthataha. Okay? He's saying Advaitam Paramarthataha. What? In reality, we saw. You remember, we saw there is mithya. Mithya is that which has a dependent reality. And that dependent reality, even within that, there are 2 subdivisions. One is Vyavaharika, which is what is empirically true, and the other one is Pratibhasika, means my subjective reality that I impute on what is there. Okay? So mithya itself is divided into two, vyavaharika and pratibhasika. Now, the person who does not know the reality, what do? What is vyavaharika, which is an empirical reality, to me it seems like what? The absolute truth. Yeah, the reality. Exactly. And the pratibhasika also seems to me like the reality. So that means, see how much confusion there is. You understand? So then, what is the so-called psychological growth? The psychological growth is I'm able to a little bit do the distinction between what? Vyavaharika and pratibhasika. When there is pratibhasika, it seemed to me like vyavaharika. Pratibhasika is my subjective reality. The vyavaharika is the empirical reality.
But if it's subjective, how can it be reality?
No, means that it is reality for you, no? And here also we are not saying it's an illusion, please understand. We are not saying that the table is an illusion, there is some reality to it. But it's not the absolute reality, it's an empirical reality, it's a dependent reality. That's why we don't give a name non-real. We give a name dependent reality. Please understand how sophisticated the whole terminology is. The whole terminology is meant so that you understand each term accurately and not create your own picture about what it is. Okay. So therefore, our whole life is lived within what? Vyavaharika and pratibhasika, empirical and subjective. Sometimes what? Not only taking empirical as the reality, but also taking my subjective reality as the reality. So that means I live with a lot of confusion. Okay? Now, if I am relatively helping myself in the world, I make a distinction between what? Subjective and empirical, and try to reduce my subjectivity and come to an empirical level. Okay? But even then, what am I doing? The empirical, which is only an empirical, still remains what? The reality for me. Okay? Now, what does Vedanta do? Shows you that yes, this is a great move that you have done, reducing your subjectivity and what? Coming to whatever is empirically true. This is a big move, but this is not over yet. In terms of reality, it is not over yet. Because even this empirical reality is still a dependent reality and not the reality. Okay? So therefore, then we say that even this empirical is still within mithya. So what is then paramarthika? Paramarthika is that which is the absolute reality. Okay? So what he's saying is paramarthataha advaita. What is the reality? There is non-dual awareness which is the reality. And then he says that Dvaitam is what? What is his Dvaitam? Then how come if there is only one, how come I see so many forms? So there he says Dvaitam Maya Matra Idam. Okay? So the Dvaitam that I see, the so-called duality in the sense that the so-called many forms that I see are what? Are they real? They are not real. Okay? They are not real in the sense that they have a dependent reality. They are not the reality. Okay? So then how is it, what is that capacity which actually gives manifestation to many? That capacity is called Maya. Right? So that means Maya Matra Idam Dvaitam Advaitaha Paramarthataha. Yes? So,
means absolute reality.
Absolute reality. Kal, is it okay?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Prapanchaha yadi vidyeta na nivarteta iti samshaya. Because our orientation is so much that what I see here is real. Everybody, it's a universal perception that what I see here, what meets my eyes is the reality. So here he wants to shake it and he says, if what you see is real, then it will always remain what it is. But what is it? It's changing all the time. It seems to be, right, non-changing, but it is constantly changing. The person who's observing is changing all the time. What is observed is changing all the time. Because they are both within what? Sukshma and Sthula, and they are constantly changing. Okay? And they are changing because of what? The causal. The causal which are unmanifest will become manifest in form of subtle and physical. So that means that whole thing is constantly changing. There is constant interaction between physical, subtle and causal, which is constantly reproducing universe, slightly differences, and over a period of time what happens? These changes are visible to you. Okay. So that means if it is total reality, that you can't give it an absolute reality, because by the time you have finished saying it, it has changed. The absolute reality is that which does not undergo any change while the changes are taking place. It is in and through all the changes and itself is free from changes. So this is what Gaudapada, imagine now, right? One thing is to understand what Upanishads are saying, then these great people, what? Put what they have understood in their own words. In one verse, how much he says? How much he says about what he has understood? That shows his clarity, right? Shankara, brilliant link to this Advaita tradition, has a teacher's teacher who's like this. Okay. Now the next verse. The next verse he says, Vikalpo vinivarteta kalpitaha yadi kenachit upadeshadayam vadaha nate dvaitam na vidyate. Okay? Somebody who's very clever is raising this question. You are talking about Advaita. Okay. But right now, right, there is something which is what? There is a student, then there is a teacher who is other than the student, then there are books which are other than the student and the teacher. So show me, where is Advaita here? There is one entity called student who is different from the teachers. And the teachers are using the books which are what? Not you or me, it is the books. So that means there is, even when you are studying so-called Advaita Vedanta, there are differences. Can you say it's all one? If the teacher and student are all one, then what? The student can also become teacher at that given point in time. And you don't need the books at all. So there are those differences. Advaita does not mean that these differences at the level of mithya, they collapse or they get mixed up. Please understand that. There are different characters, they play different roles. They are not talking that they are all just mushed up. This is the problem with this Advaita vision. If you don't understand it properly, what will you do? You'll mix it all up, saying everything is one. That is such a delusion, I tell you. It is like a delusion's delusion. Because at least the people who don't know reality, they are not confused. You are adding one more confusion. Right? And think that you are spiritual. So it is a very responsible vision. Right? So therefore, there is a difference between what? Who's the student and there is who's the teacher. And there is also a difference between what? The student, teacher and what? The books which are studied. Because the teacher learns the books, what the person learns from the books is what? Through a teacher is transferred to what? Student. Okay. And that tradition goes on. Okay. But the person who understood the oneness, what would the person understand?
There are three expressions.
Yeah, excellent. Right? All the three, the teacher is an expression of what? One reality. And plays a very different role. The student is different expression of the same reality and plays a different role. The books are serving a huge function of what? Removing the veil of a student. Okay? But they are expression of what? The same reality. Okay? We are not denying the existence of a student, books, teachers. What we are saying is what? They are all arranged in that given order by one reality, so that what? The knowledge takes place. And what is the knowledge which takes place? Exactly what Savita is saying. All three are the different expressions, correct? Different expressions of the same reality. That is the understanding that takes place. So you are not getting confused between non-existence of different roles. You see different roles. Seeing those different roles, you see one reality which manifests what? As two different roles. Okay? So therefore, the person who understands, he says, yeah, the teacher, the aspect of teacher which is the physical form and the speech is mithya. The student who has ignorance, okay, and using the words to remove that ignorance is also mithya. The knowledge, the words which come out, which do the job of removing ignorance, are also within mithya world. But they all come together. If you want to go somewhere, right? It's exactly like the Advaitin saying that the human form is mithya, the lion form is mithya, my running is also equally mithya. All three happen within one awareness which is free from everything. Okay? So that means the three are not negated. The three resolve, they are all an expression of one reality. This is what the person understands. Okay? If you try to physically collapse the student and teacher, this is why I said, oh, I don't feel Advaita. Because what people want to have is an experience of absence of subject and object. Most of the people are committed to prolonging this experience of absence of subject and object because they think that is Advaita, non-duality. Where the subject and object does not exist. Are we talking about that? The subject, the entity is there, object, the entity is there. They are both mithya. They have one satya which sustains them. And that subject and object is constantly changing. This is the reality. I don't need to physically collapse the subject and object. Not at all. Okay? So this is what he says, that even though these three characters are there in knowing, after knowing what? They are all understood as they are different expressions of one reality. Then the knowledge is totally transferred without any error. Yes? So these are the two things that Gaudapada is talking about. Now we will proceed because we have so many verses to do. And now we come back to the Upanishads. Okay? Now in the Upanishad, if you remember, I saw Uddhav going through all the notes and everything while he was waiting. Okay? If you remember the first two verses of the Upanishads, which was the first class, many days ago it seems, even though it was only 5 days ago actually. Right? So this Upanishad starts by saying all that is here is Omkar. That was the first verse. Okay? And the second verse was about Atma. Atma was said to be Brahman. Okay? And that Atma had 4 parts. Okay? So up to now, what we have done?
4 parts of Atma.
Excellent. Okay? Now in doing the 4 parts of Atma, what have we done? Have we talked only about the so-called limited understanding of the Atma that we have, which is what? My physical body? No. What have we done?
Talking about the samashti.
Excellent. Right? When I talked about that Atma, we are not talking about this limited entity that we all think we are. We included the samashti. Wonderful. Okay? So therefore at each of these first 3 parts of Atma, we included Vyashti and Samashti. And when it came to the 4th part, what did we do?
There was oneness, there was no real Vyashti or Samashti separation. There was just one.
Excellent. Correct. When it came to the 4th part of Atma, we what? Absorb the entire Vyashti and Samashti. Vyashti means individual, Samashti means the total. What? We said it all as Mithya. And there was one reality, which is this Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Okay? Existence, awareness, which is limitless. The whole show of what? Subtle, causal and physical, both at Vyashti and Samashti level, is all within that one reality. We saw that. Okay? So that means there are no real 4 parts. The 3 are Mithya, 1 is Satya. Okay? Now, that means then the whole discussion of what that Atma was over. Now, what is Omkar? What would be left as a discussion of Omkar? Because now the Omkar begins. What is remaining? No, awareness is already, it's already talked about as the 4th.
We're talking about it again.
Very good. We are talking about it again. Brilliant, Uda, right? Because you need to see it from different standpoint to make sure that we understand things correctly. Brilliant. We are talking about it again from a different standpoint. Because nothing is left actually. You've discussed the whole thing. Okay? And this is what is talking about it from a different standpoint. So let's see what that different standpoint is. Now Sarah says, now this doesn't end, but it will end in 10 days. So So ayam atma adhi aksharaha omkaraha adhi matram pada matra matrascha pada akara ukara makara iti. Okay? Now just the literal translation, and then it requires understanding. Then I will explain what it is. The literal translation is the same Atma centered on the syllable Om is presented in terms of letters constituting Om. Okay? And they are A, U and Ma. So now these forms that we have all collapsed into one awareness, these forms, because they are different, they also have what? Different names. Right? Because Advaita does not mean non-existence of forms. Advaita means that the forms are different. Okay? And because there are differences at the level of forms, there are different names given to those forms. Okay? A different form, a different name. This wood in the form of this shape is called table. The wood in the form of that shape will be called a chair. Okay? So that means because they are different forms, there are corresponding names for those forms to indicate the differences. Right? So therefore, there are infinite forms, and therefore there are how many names? Infinite names. Because each name indicates one particular form, right, and not the other. So when I say Sara, you raise your hand, who will raise the hand? Exactly. So that means that name serves a function. What is the name serving the function? There are all these forms which are bodies.
We can find that form.
Exactly. The name serves the function of identifying that form. When I say Sara, you will not mistake and you will not, unless you are a rebel and you want to raise a mistake. Why Sara and not me? Right? But when I say, then what is the purpose of name? You said, oh, the names are confusing. Names are confusing. Names are very necessary because there are many differences. And you have precise names to indicate that precise form. That is the tool that is given to you to understand things. And understand the nuances of the differences. The only thing which can do the job of making you understand the nuances of differences is through the names. You have language. The whole language is what? Meant for you to describe different forms precisely, right? And to understand those forms in its entirety. So that means just as forms are very important aspect of what the world is, names are equally important aspects of what the universe is. Because names serve a very important function in what? Distinguishing one object from the other. Okay? So therefore, if all knowledge is all forms, all names are what?
All knowledge.
Exactly. Are also what? All knowledge. Don't miss out the names when you talk about reality, because the whole world is such that the forms go along with names. Don't be simplistic about forms, because otherwise one form and the other form, how will you know the differences? Only through names. then you have so many different names, right? Because you create a jati. Jati is a group. A human being, that is one whole group. Okay? So that means a human being is following within one group, then a cow will be what? Inside that group or outside the group?
Outside.
Outside the group. But let's say you create another group, all living beings.
Inside.
Understand? How you have to cultivate your buddhi to understand how these differences are and how they operate. You need names, you need sounds. Okay. If you say that your reference point is India, then what? Those who are Indians will be what? Inside the group. And those who are not Indians would be what? Outside the group. But let's say you create a new group called humanity. Who will be inside? All human beings. So that means you, in order for your understanding to reach all these different standpoints, you need names. You need language. Okay? Forms and names go together. Because forms and names make you understand things accurately. They have a function. Okay? So now, Omkara, all that is here is one, was seen from the standpoint of what? The forms. Now it is seen, everything is seen from the standpoint of what? Names. Because names and forms go together. So therefore, Omkara is, now if Omkara is all knowledge, it has to what? Include names of what? All forms. Right? Now the names are so many. In the present, how many names are there?
Yeah.
In the present, in the universe.
Infinite.
Infinite even now. Then if you include past and if you include future, how many names will be there?
Limitless.
Limitless names. Infinite names. Okay? So now you have to give one name to this all knowledge which includes all names. Just like one all knowledge included all forms, you also have to make what? All knowledge include all names. How will you do it? Through this ingenious word called Om. Om has Akara, Ukara and Makara. Now in these three sounds, you collapse all the different sounds which make different names. Because names are nothing but permutation and combination of these basic sounds. That means again you are using Omkara to represent what? All names. So how it happens, Upanishad employs the same methodology as, and he says the names are not separate from forms. He says Omkara has 3 matras, 3 syllables, and Atma has what? 3 quarters, 3 parts. The parts are connected to what?
Each of the 3 syllables.
Excellent.
Not three
These sounds, right? And the sounds are connected to the forms. Matrascha pada, padascha matra. Okay. So that means each one. So then you want to say
Just
something.
one
Yes.
syllable. In fact, it's one
Each
syllable.
Yes.
But the duration here, you need a little bit Sanskrit, okay? Of this Om. A is one. If you structure in terms of duration of each letter that you pronounce. A will be one matra. U will be another matra. When you do O, it becomes two matra. Okay, 2 units of time. And then Ma will be one matra. Okay, so it is 3. Matra means not syllable, it means this time unit. I don't know, there would be a word in poetry or something like that to
So,
say.
Surya, the way it is used in Mandukya is the syllable, because on each syllable is
Letter.
imposed Jagrita.
Letter. See,
Yeah,
letter
sorry.
is different.
Letter, yes.
Letter is
Yeah,
different
correct.
from syllable.
Yeah, sorry, yes,
Okay.
letter. Yeah, letter. That's what it means. Okay, that's correct. Letter. Okay. A, U and Ma are 3 letters.
Yes.
Okay. And each letter represents what? One part of Atma. There is a correspondence done. And this is something which is a methodology which is used. Okay? So now we will go to how this akara, ukara and makara are correspondent to, connected to what? 3 parts of Atma. Okay?
Atma has 4 parts.
Yeah, that's true. Because the 4th one is the truth of this Omkara, which is this awareness. It will come. Okay? Because just the same way that Atma was, you're right, this is very, very interesting. What she's saying is, when Atma was talked about, there were 4 parts, there were 4 quarters, right? And when Omkara is talked about, there are what? 3 letters. Okay? Because the 4th one is what?
Omkara.
It
Okay.
includes, exactly, it includes both the
Exactly.
Jiva and Ishvara, which is, this is why. Okay? In that one, there is no separation between Jiva and Ishvara, the individual and the total. The 4th one resolves the entire difference, which is neither name or form, it is the truth of all names and facts. So now, let us go and we can see how these words A, U and Ma are used by the Upanishads, okay, to show what it wants to show. Here he says, Jagarita sthanaha Vaishwanaraha Akaraha Prathama Matra Aptehe Adim Twat Va Apnoti Ha Vai Sarvan Kaman Adishcha Bhavati Ya Evam Veda. Here he says, this, the literal translation is Vaishwanara, whose sphere of activity is the waking state, is the letter A because of the similar feature, pervasiveness or being the first. He who knows thus obtains all objects of desires and becomes the foremost. Okay? So what he says, now Akara stands for the waker. Okay. The first syllable of Omkara, which is Akara, he stands for the waker. Who's the waker? The one who has, excellent, right? Who has physical. In fact, now you have to say, in the waking, you have all 3. You have what? The physical, you have subtle. Right now, you are physically sitting here and you're using your subtle faculties to understand me. And you also have what? The causal, because one moment is changing the other. One thought which is manifest now is going to become unmanifest according to the laws. And another is going to become manifest. Okay? So that means Akara stands for this waker who has physical, subtle and the the causal, but primarily physical, because it's only in the waking that physical is available, not in the dream and in the deep sleep. Okay? That's why we emphasize physical. Okay? So therefore, this akara and the entire waking state of everyone is connected. Okay? So now, why is akara and the entire waking state is connected? What are the similarities between them? Okay. So he says that the most primary experience that is given to you is that of what? The waking state. Okay? Because in that you have all three available to you. All your inquiry that you are doing, okay, is taking place where? In the waking state. All the understanding that you get by listening to Vedanta, listening to anything, it happens where? In the waking state. Okay? And this is where the full of you is available to you. Okay? So therefore, the ignorance, the possibility of removing ignorance is where? In the waking state, not in the dream or in... Don't say that, oh, now I'm getting dreams, which is I have a dream, the teacher who comes in dreams and removes my conclusion. That doesn't happen. You're hallucinating. In the waking state, all this takes place. Okay. So this is where he says that that is the foremost. The foremost is that it is the first state and it is the most pervasive. It's the most complete state. Okay. Now, one thing you have to understand is that in the waking state, all the names and all the forms that you see they include what? The physical forms, the subtle forms, and what? The causal. And this is why you have different names for different forms. In fact, all the names and forms that we have are only because in the waking we come to know all three. For example, I say Sara's body, I see one body which is different from another body. So I'll say this is Sara, this is Monica. That means I make the distinction at the level of physical body. Then I said Sara is looking very happy and Monica is looking even happier. So I see different degrees. What am I using? The words to describe what? The physical body? No. I'm using words to describe what? The subtle. Okay. And when I say that 5 years from now, Sara's life may be different from my life, what am I incorporating? She will be a massager and I will be a bigger massager and I'll be a bigger teacher. What am I doing? I'm describing the causal, what 5 years from now, which is unmanifest now, how I'm postulating how it will manifest in the future. So that means in the waking state, we have vocabulary for all three. The physical, the subtle, and the causal. Okay? So when we are talking about the causal means we are talking about laws. Okay? There is a law which I see from the standpoint of how the sun works or how the galaxy works. I give it a different name, which is what? Physics or astrophysics. Now when I'm studying the law in terms of what? The gravity. Again it is what? Laws of physics. Just not with reference to those stars which are very far away, but just the ones which make this little pen that I have for. Okay. So that means I have all these different names to denote many different things. I'm using this one little entity, I give it a name of what? A body. But then this body itself has one different part. I give what? Another name. Now then there is one part which is a physical part, I have one name for it. And then there is a subtle part and I have another name for it. And the laws themselves, I have so many different names for those laws. Because they all exist. And I need to bring them in my awareness. So I have to give different names to them. So that means in my waking, I have vocabulary, or I create vocabulary to understand not only different physical forms, but also the subtle forms and the causal laws which govern how these different forms are going to work. Everything happens in the waking. You not only have, please understand, you not only have names in the waking for physical forms, you have it for all.
Also, I think that pervasiveness of R can be seen as all the letters of the Hindi alphabet have the sound in them.
Exactly. Right? So therefore, in every consonant, this is a very, in order for the whole language, and this is exactly what it means, right? In any language, you have two categories. One is what we call a consonant and the other one is a vowel. Okay? So therefore, what he is saying is, akara is the most basic sound. Try to pronounce a consonant without a vowel. It's very difficult, and this is why, in fact, what happens is that, when we speak, when we teach, we have to use Sanskrit words, right? And people think that they have to correct our pronunciation because we don't say Ram, we say Rama. When we use vernacular language, what do? In fact, in the word Rama, there are how many consonants and how many syllables? How many vowels?
Two consonants.
Excellent. Right? The Rakara is one consonant, then A, Dirgha A is a vowel, which is the second one. Makara is a consonant and Akara is the last vowel. When I say Ram, what am I doing?
This I am not using.
Exactly. I am not using this vowel because this is Akara. It is Rama, not Ram. We swallow. What Savita is saying is absolutely right. In a vernacular language, when we use Hindi, Gujarati, I think it's the same for Bengali, we eliminate this last vowel. We don't pronounce it. But it is there. So in Sanskrit, you are very alert. You don't skip things which are there. In a hurry to express everything. We have all the time in the world, as Sarah said. You have to do justice to the words. Okay? Rama. So I have to explain to them, please don't teach me how to pronounce Sanskrit word because The problem doesn't lie in my pronunciation. The problem lies in the fact that in vernacular languages we are swallowing the last vowels.
Even in between the words. For example, we say upkar. Say upakara.
We say samta. Samata.
Samata.
actually.
Exactly.
But we
It is
say
samata.
samta.
Yeah, exactly. So that means we make into conjunct consonant, where there are actually separate consonants. So that means we speak the language. That itself shows the precision of the mind is all little bit what? It's all haywire. Exactly. It shows. And this is what your thinking process is also a little haywire.
Actually, the elders in my family or most of the families, they speak much more accurately than what we speak. And we youngsters, we used to, hey, what is this? Why are you saying like this? And my mom or a granny, they used to say that is the way it is. And they never gave us the technicalities of it, but they said this is the way it has to be spoken.
Right? So therefore, along with consonant, as Uddhav says, akara, the vowels accompany the consonant. And akara is the most fundamental vowel. Okay? So therefore, it is the first one. When you open your mouth, which is the sound which comes first? Okay? So this is the most primary sound, and that sound is represented with the waking, because in the waking you are your full self. In that waking, everything, all the solving of the puzzle about what the life is possible. Okay? So this is what he says. Now, imagine the person who, without seeing the entirety, is just doing this given part of what we call upasana. That my physical being, my waking state, which represents my physical body and my interaction with all the physical bodies, is part of what? Where I'm interacting with forms and I'm using words. And Ishvara is what? Not only the forms, but there are also different words. And my objectivity lies in whether I'm using the accurate words for what? Accurate forms. Now imagine I begin to see that I say, now this is going to be my commitment. That itself has a huge result. Let me see the forms accurately without projecting anything, and let me use the language what precisely to articulate what I see accurately. Imagine this is your commitment. Forget everything else. There is a result for it. He says, even that commitment to seeing the forms accurately without projecting and using right words without imprecision will give you, what is the result? He says, he who knows thus obtains all objects of desires and becomes the foremost. Okay? Why is the person who obtains all desires? I have a desire for that object. The extent to which I am going to fulfill those desires are, or deal with those desires are, dependent upon what? I assess what those forms are, their importance in my life, then what? Engage in the right actions which are necessary to obtain those forms. And then in case I don't get them, what? How to be without those forms. So that means if I have a mastery in identifying the forms and to deal with them accurately and to put their value accurately, itself is what? A huge thing which will enable me to engage in the world with certain discretion. Okay? So even that commitment itself will bring a lot of result. And this is what we are saying. In order to understand the total, you have to get every level right. Because if you're just skimming things, you're not accurately even seeing the forms, you're not accurately expressing the forms and the relationships accurately, where is the question of your understanding the totality? Because there is so much distortion all along. Start with that. Right? Akara is equated to the waking state, and waking state means what? In which, as Sara says, the entire physical universe is available to you, and also the subtle and the causal. Surya?
Just a little note here. If you look at humanity, how it has progressed from the first humans to now, what is the process? The process is giving names to everything. Right? And not only giving names to everything, to the star they give names, to this bacteria, to the particle, and in between everything they give names. Then they classify this into groups, the species, different animals, different particles, different cells, and so on. And then not only that, once you have done that, then you describe also what? The connections, the relationship between all these different things for which you have given a name. So let's say, humanity has the journey in some respect can be seen, all these disciplines of knowledge can be seen through this lens. This is
accurately finding the forms and giving the accurate name for it, an accurate name for the relationships.
And then what are we able to do now? We are able to send a space shuttle to some remote planets. It's amazing. Only because of that. Some people were committed to that.
Okay. Now, the Upanishad is using the second letter of Omkara, which is U, to what? The Swapnasthanaha. So we will see the 10th verse. It says, Swapnasthanaha Taijasaha Ukaraha Dvitiya Matra Utkarshat Ubhayatvat Utkarshati Havai Gnana Santatim Samanascha Bhavati Na Asti Brahmavit Kule Bhavati Ya Evam Veda. Okay. So now here he is saying that now this Tejasa, who is the Tejasa? The one who is available to you in dream, in the dream state. Okay? Whose sphere of activity is in the dream state is the letter U of Omkara. Okay? Now what are the similarities? He says, because of it's a representation, as Surya is saying. Right? Omkara is used to make you see something which is incredible. Okay? So here he says, because of the similarity, what is the similarity between Ukara and dream state? He says, coming, between the two coming later or intermediate position. He who knows thus increases the children of knowledge, becomes equal. No one is born in his family who is not a knower of Brahman. My God, that is something which is amazing. Okay, so that means you will say, now let me do only this, well, this particular thing that I see, ukara and the subtle. That's all. Alright? Because that's what is required. Now, what are the similarities? As I said, in the waking, all three are available: physical, subtle and causal. In the dream, physical is not available. You are not connected to your physical body. All the aches and pains of physical body are not available to you. Okay? But is the causal available in the dream state? Yes. Right? So now, absolutely. Right? So that means in the waking you have all three. In the dream you have subtle and causal. And in the deep sleep you have only causal. So here what is highlight is the subtle. So this is where he says that in that subtle, which is in the dream state, okay, is equated to ukara. Why? Because the dream state comes after waking state. What is the primary state? Waking. Okay? Now a dream is like an in-between state, where neither you are totally awake nor you are what? Totally resolved. There is this in-between state. Okay? Now imagine if you are opening your mouth to pronounce anything, the first sound that what Uddhav is saying, which comes out, is akara. No matter which word it is. Okay? And when you close your mouth, which is the sound which comes? Makara. In between, what comes is and try to, from that to close the mouth, you will have that in-between sound. Between and ma, there is this in-between sound, ukara. Okay?
You cannot
now,
say
that
E. You cannot say E when you are in between. You cannot say E when you are in between, right? You can say only U.
Right? And then ma, in between there is this u. Okay? So that means in between. Okay? So from this akara, which stands for waking, and makara, which stands for the resolution, there is this in-between state, which is the un-between letter, which is ukara. And between the waking and total deep sleep, there is this in-between, which is what we call dream. Okay? So ukara is equated to the dream. Okay? So this way you see that this given consciousness is connected to everything. Don't think that it is not. All these are different forms, and for those forms you have different names. Okay? And all is captured with what? Forms and names. The forms in the, now the dream itself you describe differently. Today I dreamt really well. It is what? Then you say today was a nightmare. You have a different name for this dream, because you are using a different name to describe what? The quality of that dream. So you need vocabulary. And this is how the whole language is built. And this is why Sanskrit, as I said, is an amazing language, because the same noun is declined, what? 7 times according to whether it is a subject, object, instrument, dative, ablative, genitive and locative. To add precision to what I mean. Okay, so that means in English language, if I want to say I see you, I cannot change the order of the word because I have to put I, or I say Sarah sees Monica, I have to use Sarah first because she is the subject and Monica later because she is the object. Okay? In Sanskrit, I can change the order and there is no problem because Sarah, whether she appears at the first of the sentence or the end, she has a declension, Saraha, which will make her the subject. There is no ambiguity depending upon the position of that name in the sentence. She will always remain a subject regardless of what, where she is placed. Monica, she gets an accusative case. Even if the sentence begins with Monica, because the declension is accusative, she will always remain the object of that sentence.
Just say the 2 sentences starting with Sarah and Monica in Sanskrit.
Sarah, Monica, Pashyati. Okay, Monica, Sarah, Pashyati. Pashyati,
See.
Sarah, Monica. Pashyati, Monica, Sarah. Or anyway, it will convey exactly the same meaning. Exactly the same meaning. Because Monica gets the accusative case. Sarah gets the nominative case. And Pashyati is a verb which describes what is action that Sarah is doing. This is the precision of language. Imagine your mind which becomes so precise in describing the physical and subtle world. That is the mind which is required to what? Understand the final reality. A confused mind cannot, because the concepts are not clear. When I saw this, this play, Einstein, one sentence of Einstein struck me, and he says, if you cannot describe something, okay, with a certain simplicity, then you have not understood it. Okay. So that means we think that anything which is very profound is very complex. Everything is profound, is complex because I haven't understood its profundity accurately. If I have understood its profundity accurately, that means my understanding is clear, I will have what? Accurate words for it. I will not mix up, I will not create ideas which are non-precise. These names and forms, don't think it is something which is just like that. Your accurate understanding of the forms and your effort to accurately describe those forms is showing the mind that you require for this understanding. And this is exactly what is said. Unless you have that mind which is describing the forms accurately, there is no way you are going to have the knowledge of Brahman. And if you have done that job, then what? Knowledge becomes easy. There is a result for it. Okay? The whole preparation that we are talking about, what is this preparation that we are talking about? Precision, non-projection. not imputing one attribute to the other and being confused. That is the clarity. And this is what Vedanta, the person who has come to Vedanta, asks for it. Because nobody comes with that clarity. Everybody comes with a jumbo mumbo. Everybody has a mumbo jumbo. I was saying yes, that's true. Okay. So this is why it is said that if within the physical and subtle, if you can identify things, if you can identify your dysfunctional emotions as dysfunctional, that itself is a huge start. And if you can fix it, even better. Because unless you do this, what? The bigger picture will always elude you. This is what he says, Brahmavid. Otherwise, that, because how do you understand the reality of all these different things of the world? Where do you understand? Where do you understand the reality of the entire world? In your mind. What is this mind? Part of the Sukshma. And where do you undo the puzzle of life? Same place, in the mind. In order to undo the puzzle of the whole existence, what kind of mind do you need? Because the mind is the one which is going to solve that puzzle. Awareness doesn't need to solve any puzzle in the first place. Where is the way? Where is the way? In the mind. That's why what do? If I want to know, if I want to remove my veil with reference to the physical body, I do what? I go to medical school. But if I want to remove the veil about the entirety of Ishvara, where do I come to? Vedanta. But I need my mind which figures it all out. Okay? So that means until the mind is the only place where the knowledge takes place. There is no other place where the knowledge takes place. If that mind, and for every knowledge, you could be born a genius with a very high IQ, and you want to understand all the equations that every physicist has come up with. That point in time, because you are a genius. Will it happen? It's impossible. So what do you need to do? Even with your very high IQ, what do you need to do? You need to enroll in your primary school and you have to go through some basic science. There is no shortcut. You may be skipping 1 or 2 grades because you are very smart, but nowadays they say even that is not advisable because there is a natural process. And when you abort that process, even though you make that person grow very fast in one, but what happens? The other things are sacrificed. You need time. Once the primary education is over, what do? You go to secondary, then undergraduate, then masters, and then PhD. So how many years I spent? The mind which is already a bright mind, the mind which is already, let's say, with a very high IQ, how many years I spent to know all the intricacies of all the different equations? How many years I required of dedicated study? Long period and long reflection. Okay. You can say, yeah, there are always exceptions because Einstein didn't even like the school. He was not even a bright student in school. He was a dumbo, and he says the teachers, that was also in the play. He says, teachers called my parents and said, this boy is incapable of learning. Maybe he did not get stimulated in school, but how many hours he spent thinking about physics? How many hours before he discovered these amazing things which nobody's buddhi had yet figured out? Hours and hours and hours of dedicated reflection. To the extent that he said, the person who was looking after me, was not well, but his mind was so preoccupied with physics and solving those equations, he totally what? That is not what we are saying. What we are saying is, any learning takes time and it requires preparation. Okay. Now, you want to solve the biggest puzzle of life. And you want it to happen, what? Immediately.
Formula.
Sorry?
Give me a formula.
Give me a formula, exactly. 2-day workshop. Give me the truth. In 45 minutes, I'll explain to you entire Mandukya Upanishad. And I'll draw some graphs and you say, oh yeah, that's right, now I figured it all out. Let's go home. So this is where it requires time and it requires preparation. What is the time and preparation? What is the nature of time and preparation? Get your assessment of forms accurate and get your description of those forms. When you can describe those forms accurately, that means what? You have understood them accurately. Only when you have understood them accurately, you can describe it accurately. And this is why many people say, oh, I understand what Vedanta is saying, but I can't talk about it. Why? And that happens to all of us, even all of us, right? You say, my God, this is an amazing knowledge, but I have no words to describe it. That means what? The understanding is in the process. That process has not yet been complete. Because if I understood everything accurately, I should be able to describe it in a comprehensible manner. But if my buddhi gets all confused in describing it, means what? I haven't understood it. Okay? Or if somebody else's question becomes my question, then what? I didn't think about it, but when somebody raises it, I'm unable to answer it. Means what?
There is one angle which I didn't look at.
Exactly. There is another angle which I did not look at. So when that angle is raised, I am unable to answer. Okay. Understanding of reality is not a job of what? 1 day, 2 days, even unfortunately 10 days. It's a lifetime pursuit. Okay. And the lifetime pursuit is all preparation. And the preparation occurs in 2 forms. What are the 2 forms? One is my growth, and the second is listening to Shastra again and again and again to capture all different aspects and all the nuances, making my buddhi subtler and subtler and subtler to capture the totality of things, of ideas and concepts, of realities, not even ideas and concepts, realities. Inquiry into reality is an insight into how the all-knowledge operates. And all-knowledge is highly sophisticated. What is the mind which is able to understand the all-knowledge? You require a very refined mind to understand the operating of all-knowledge. Vedanta, for Vedanta you need Ishvara. Because it's an insight into all knowledge. Manifestation and the truth of that all knowledge, both. Okay, so this is what is said, the Ukara and the Swapna, and then he says the result is both are this in between, and then he says once you take care of your subtle, which is the mind, then he says that there is a result for it. Okay? Then he says nobody, if you have prepared your mind, okay, and exposed yourself to this knowledge, then nobody can deny you this knowledge too. Okay? So in that case, otherwise as Uddha was saying, you just do this and then everything will be accomplished. What is said is, this is a precondition for the knowledge to take place. To take care of your subtle, which is your mind, which is going to what? That's where the ignorance is, and that's where what? The knowledge has to take place. Okay. Now the third, Sushuptisthana, we will see in the next class.
Just can you explain for me the last sentence? No one is born in his family who is not a knower of God.
That's exactly what I said, that if you have prepared your mind, right, which is a mind which is able to see the world accurately and to describe things accurately, okay, and then with the same mind, if you listen to Shastra, it is able to capture the meaning.
It's more literal. Yeah.
Sorry?
So it's more literally meant here in this family and
yeah, exactly. Because yeah, absolutely. It's literally meant because the minute you become the person who not only understands the final reality, but you also are not confused, right, about how the physical world operates and how the subtle operates, then what? What will you pass on to your own children? That clarity. So that means what you understand, you pass on to your children. And this is why they say, now the other Veka, okay, if you are born in a family of scholars, it's a result of what? Punya. Because you already start with a big advantage. You are born in a family which is, imagine looking into Shastra.
Dinner table conversation.
Yeah.
It will be the dinner table
Conversation. You will be exposed to this whole scholarship and the way of thinking and all from the childhood. And then you will grow. So like how Rashna was saying, I'm already thinking about how to transfer this knowledge to my grandchildren. They're not even born yet. And she's already thinking, right? Imagine her grandchildren, they are born to her, where she is already thinking how to give them value education, even though the teaching cannot be given to them immediately. The whole upbringing would be what? Something which is conducive. Right? So in that sense.
Yes.
Now the third one, let's see. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti